Welcome to Foundation in C#. This is Module 2, and this lesson we're going to cover type conversion. So type conversion is when we convert one type to another. And a type is like a string or an int or something like that. So for example, we might have something as a string, but really it's an int. We want to have it in that int value or variable type. So that's what we're going to cover today. And let's go ahead and jump right into Visual Studio. We're going to go File, New Project. And this new project will be of type console app, like you've done before. So Windows Desktop, console app, make sure it's C#. We're going to call this console. Int. This is an attempt at an implicit conversion. And what an implicit conversion is one that happens that you don't specify. You don't say I'm converting now. You just say do it, and it converts it. So if you go the other way, that can sometimes work, but typically we don't want implicit conversions. Now, here's the thing about conversions. Every time you convert from one type to another, it takes some effort, takes some work on the processor's part. So it does cause a little bit of slowdown. Now, that's not to say you should never convert or you should avoid it at all costs. You should avoid it, but don't panic over it, okay? So yes, conversion takes some effort, but everything does in programming. It's just we want to be aware of it so we don't always just say, let's convert over and over again. We want to try to avoid it if we can, or do it once instead of 5 times. So let's look at how to do conversion. So we're back to getting a string, and that's great. But if I were to say something like, and let's just do this, and then we'll see how it doesn't work. If I were to say, let's make sure that we tell people how old they're going to be in 10 years, for whatever reason. So we'll say age text plus equals, now plus equals adds. So I'll show you what this does in just a minute. Plus equals 10. So plus equals is the equivalent of if I did this. Age text equals age text plus 10. So that plus equals right there is the equivalent of age text plus 10. So I'm just saying add 10 to the age, which if I'm 40, then it should say 50, right? So let's do this. Console write line. And we're going to say, we'll do a $sign syntax. And we'll say, you are going to be age text years old in 10 years. Okay, so the $sign syntax, again, to remind you, is it replaces whatever in the curly braces with the actual value here. So age text, it's going to take the actual value and put it in this spot. So you're going to be 50 years old in 10 years. Let's run this and see what happens. What's your age? My age is 40. You're going to be 4,010 years old in 10 years. And wow, I will be old. Not really the case. And the reason why this didn't work is because look at it had 40 in there, and so it appended 10. It didn't add 10. There's a difference. So this plus equals 10, first of all, it did an implicit conversion because 10 is an integer. If you mouse over it, it says int 32. So how did that become a string? Well, it did an implicit conversion and said, since this is already a string, I'm going to make this a string too, and then add this string to this string. And so it said, okay, 40 is my text. I'm going to add 10, no problem. 4010 is the new string. That's not what we're looking for, though. We're looking for 50. So somehow we have to turn this into a number so that adding it gives us the right value. So let's do this. Let's comment this out. We're going to try again. And this time we're going to do a conversion. So there's a couple of different ways we can convert types. There is a safe way and a not so safe way. And it all depends on trust. So if I were to trust the user, I could say int age equals int.parse. And I pass in a string. If you notice, you read this, it says converts the string representation of a number to its 32-bit signed integer equivalent. So I pass in age text. That will convert this string to a number and put it into the age integer value. So now age will have 40 in here, but it's an int now, not a string. Which means if I do age plus equals 10, then I can do the same console statement. I'll copy and paste it. And instead of age text, we'll just say age. Application might continue on in a way that you never intended it to. So you really do want it to crash, or you want to handle it properly. Those are the two places to do it. So it says the input string was not in a correct format, meaning this text, you can't change that into a number. That doesn't work that way. So what do we do here? Well, there's another solution we can do. Comment that out. And we're going to say, and this is a little bit more tricky of a solution, but I want to show you how we can accomplish this. So we can say bool, remember booleans are true or false, that's it, true or false, is valid age equals int.tryParse. Now see it, that description is awesome because, parse says I'm just going to do it no matter what. And if it doesn't work, it's going to blow up. TryParse says I'm going to give it a shot. But if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. So int.tryParse, we pass in our string, so age text. And we have this out int result. Notice right here. And in fact, if we declare this out int, we'll call it age, not result. What this does is this is kind of an old school way of doing things, but it's still baked into .NET, and so we still use it. And that's what's called an output variable. So normally we have variables we pass into these methods, we pass in a value. But in this case, they're actually passing out a value. So we have this value coming out of tryParse, which is a Boolean. So I could cut this. I could just Control X, put the if statement in, and paste it back in. But there's a nice little shortcut here. If we right click and say snippet, surround with, now it's not this hashtag if, the # if. It's not that one. But if we type if, there's the if, tab. Now notice my code's inside of the if statement now, and I just need to change whatever it is that where the true is. So if is valid age equals true. Now again, I don't have to say equals true. I could just say if is valid age, which does read very cleanly. But I'm just being more explicit here just to kind of show you that that's what we're looking for. So if is valid age equals true, then do this because this is going to be the correct age. We can add to it and we're good to go. But what if they don't give us a valid age? Well, we can say else and just say console right line, that was not a valid age. That's it. So now let's run this again. What's your age? 40. You'll be 50 years old in 10 years. Great. Let's try it again. And this time, I'm going to be 50. That was not a valid age. Excellent. So it said this string right here, that's not a number. Therefore, it's not a valid age. You have to give us a number. So the key here is we need to be careful how we do type conversions. Because if we just trust the value is right, that might not always be correct. Okay? So I have a personal mantra of never trust the user. Because if you're asking the user for information like their age, they will give you bad information. Now, it's not to say that the user is always malicious. That's not true. But they may be confused because you didn't specify. Let's just be clear here. What's your age? If I said 17, that is a valid age if you're talking to me. But what you're actually asking for is a numeric value, not the text equivalent of that numeric value. So that's where there's a little bit of ambiguity here. Well, the user's going to find a reason to put this in here. Okay, they're not going to think, oh, they really want a number here. They're going to say, well, 17 is a number. It's just that I've typed it out because I'm being more clear. So input that comes from the user, you've got to make sure that you validate it in some way. In this way, we're saying before we start adding to it, we need to make sure that it's a valid age. We're not going to just parse it because that would blow up the application. Now, that's not to say that int.parse is never useful. It is in some cases, but typically it's safer to use try parse. That way you can check, is it valid? And if it's not, you tell them that wasn't valid. Now, we just did a parse for int, but the cool thing is, that's not the only kind of parse we can do. Let me just show you. I'm not going to run through examples of all of them because I think that you can understand how to extrapolate and do your own. But let's just say bool.tryparse. Or how about double.tryparse? Or decimal.tryparse. Okay, so there's always different converters based upon a type you want to go to. So it doesn't have to just be an int. It can be other base types like Boolean and double and decimal. And there's others as well. So that's really all there is to type conversion. Type conversion is fairly simple as long as you do it right. But sometimes you need to do that type conversion because originally we tried to add age text and add 10 to it. But the problem there is that a string plus something else is going to be just appended on the end. So 4010 is not what we're looking for. And that's where parse or try parse come in to allow us to convert it. And so you put it into a new variable, and then you use that new variable with things like greater than, less than, adding, subtracting, all those fun things you can do in an int that you couldn't do with a string. So that's the type conversion lesson. My pro tip for this lesson, avoid type conversion whenever possible. So if I was just going to display the user's age, not add, subtract from it, not anything like that, just display it, I would just keep it in that age text. I wouldn't convert it because the console write line converts it right back to a string. So it doesn't really seem to be a reason why I'd need to have that as an integer. It's only when I need to use it for things like adding or subtracting, or saying, is it greater than 30? Is it less than 50? Those types of things, would I need to convert it to an integer. So if I'm looking through things, I'd want to avoid type conversion if possible. So for example, if I was going to say, is it less than 30? If not, is it less than 50? If not, is it less than 80? Well, I wouldn't type convert every single time. I'd convert once at the very beginning and then compare that converted age for each of those different comparisons. That way I'm doing it once versus multiple times. So wherever possible, just try to make sure that you limit your conversions to only what you need and not try and repeat it over and over again. Okay, so your homework for this lesson, I want you to capture the user's age from the console, kind of like we did in this lesson, but then identify how old they were in the year 2000. Okay, so that's a little tricky. You got to figure out how you do that. But if they were not born yet, so let's just say it's 2018 right now when I'm recording this. So if they were born in, let's say 2004, well, they weren't born in 2000. Therefore, you wouldn't want to have a negative. You weren't negative 4 years old. And so you're just going to say, hey, you weren't born yet. But if you were born yet, how old were you? And so that's going to kind of use some of the stuff you've learned before as well as this type conversion stuff. So you'll use some if and else statements and also the conversion to their age and do some subtraction on that as well. So I hope you enjoy that. Try and get this done. Try and look back over the lessons if you have to kind of help you out. But figure out how this works. Make sure you test it with a person that was born, let's say, is 10 years old, as well as a person that was 20 and 30 and 40. That way you have good tests to see, for example, were they born yet or not, and then also what those numbers would be, and make sure you verify those numbers are right. So once you get that done, go ahead and move on to the next lesson.